AI startup, when is a good time? The timing of a startup is very, very important. I know many AI startups are coming up. So, is this year really good for any new AI startup to come out with new tools still, or we are already reaching some kind of a saturation or too many ones out there?
Yeah,
What do you
I would
think?
say the best next time to get a startup going is today. The worst has been yesterday. So the longer you wait to put your idea into
Yeah.
market and actually validate whether there's demand for it, of course, you do it as soon as possible without investing time, too significant time of effort and effort of actually validating whether the idea has foothold in the market. So
Yeah.
it's hard to say, are you really behind AI adoption? It depends on where you play. So if you are really solving a white space opportunity, got to get to market as fast as possible. But if you're solving a problem that there's the competitive landscape of those tools is just so saturated, you just kind of have to understand that it's going to be harder to compete unless you have some
Yeah.
differentiation in your business, which comes in the form of IP and data. And for startups, I would say, the biggest challenge is going to be what type of models you can build when there is no data. And what you're going to be kind of bottlenecked into is using generative AI models, which by themselves are commodities. I think let's just call them that. Everyone has
Right.
access to the same models. And so, what are you doing different than someone else in your space is doing? What kind of IP, so intellectual property, are you bringing into the solution that no one else can replicate? So, and then in a lot of cases where organizations, actually larger organizations, have a leg up in this, is that they've been collecting this data for years, decades
Right.
sometimes. And so they have a lot of that data to actually put into use and to really kind of build these unique models. But startups are a bit different. So there's a data acquisition step that they have to do, whether they want to embrace it. If it's generative AI, it comes down to understanding what unique value are you bringing, and it has to be differentiated and not easily replicated.
Correct.
Because again, if a big company notices that, hey, they're actually doing something really cool, and it's
Yeah.
actually they're building it off of our model, let's say it's Google, and oh, they're just doing this thing over here, and then that software layer that's on top of that model is just so light, it would be easy. It would be a couple of sprints work for these Google engineers to replicate a lot of that work, and especially with no code solutions, it's probably even faster than that. So you really have to kind of think about your differentiation and competitive moat of how you're actually building this, what IP you're bringing, what unique value you're adding, to kind of to your company, and then how big do you
Right.
want to get? Because the bigger your ambitions and the bigger the vision, the more visibility you're going to have, and the easier it is to know for these larger companies for you it's to notice you and to potentially replicate your success. So it comes down to, again, data, unique data acquisition. And in a lot of startups, what I've seen is sometimes it does take time. And
Correct.
instead of thinking of just generative AI solutions and automations, and then building these custom solutions, which becomes more of a consulting, more of a service component to your business, how can you actually build repeatable software as a service that you could deploy very quickly? You could scale it to many, many clients, but it has to be differentiated and it does take time and feedback. So you have to bring in users to actually use that. And that becomes a source of a competitive moat, actually, because
Right.
that's the network effect of improving your system that Google will not be able to replicate in a couple of sprints, because you have the time component, you have that learning system that you've built into your business, that your users are helping you improve that product through feedback, through interviews and things like that. And that is unique data you're now generating and
Right.
benefiting from, which again, time to market is really important. So the sooner that you can put a proof of concept or a pilot out in the market, get some users on, start learning and improving the system, the sooner you are to market to capture that, the faster you're building that differentiation.
Actually, with AI and with last year, there's so many similar solutions on the market now. I mean, even if they are not, what's happening is the AI building tools. You can write like thousands and thousands of code in no time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I understand when you talk about IP itself, but
Mm-hmm.
IP and software is also a little tricky because now it's like by the time somebody thinks about an IP, somebody else can simply
Mm-hmm.
say, go say ChatGPT, can you do this for me? And within few hours, that's it. It would be out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, what do you think about these solutions? All of them trying to compete for the similar kind of thing, right? I mean,
The
being
no code.
similar in yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's definitely lowered the entry to for anyone without a technical background to be able to enter
Correct.
into the space. So I think it's huge opportunity for someone that had not had maybe a startup capital to be able to like launch their idea into market and validate it. So I think there's
Right.
huge opportunity for people who have been sitting on like really great ideas to be able to put it out in the market and then actually validate. But with that comes, of course, like the cons, because now that you've democratized access, everyone has an equal playing field and similar access to
I know.
similar to those tools and potentially replicate them. This is where my prior comment comes in very relevant. The the time will tell which tools have built the most robust software based on the IP and the unique factors they're bringing into the system. So if you're actually building a solution that is robust from the beginning, you're building these learning systems, you're kind of very mindful that you want this to be a differentiated product and you're very confident that the way you're building no one else can replicate, that will stand the test of time. And a lot
Correct.
of these software, like light software applications, may see an initial adoption as a competitive offering, maybe out, out cutting you by costs, but people will see the value of actually paying a little bit more for something that stands the test of time. So the more robust kind of solutions, for example, like scribing solutions in the market, you'll see kind of stood the test of time because what they've been building is quietly, is voice transcription and coding, is that a difficult problem to solve by engineering standards? No. I mean, you and I could
Right.
probably sit down and figure something out over the weekend. But
Correct.
why are all of these other tools, and there's hundreds, I actually did an analysis on this a couple of weeks ago, there's hundreds of them. But if you
Correct.
look at who is actually standing out in the market, they're the ones who have been in the market, building, quietly building their competitive moat. And it's really hard to stand up to their quality because they've built this
Correct.
network effect of feedback and things like that. So are they doing anything that's like completely different and novel? Some of them have patents. So some things that are related to it, but they wouldn't have gotten there if they didn't consistently and persistently continue to build and then making
Correct.
it more robust. And that makes all of these other startups kind of fall out and then become noise. So I think the important lesson here is that if you believe in your idea and then you've kind of validated that there's a market need, there's no need to overthink the initial kind of demand, or I would say like product market fit kind of validation. But once
Correct.
you see that there is a signal, you got to bring in the right team to actually build it the right way for you, because that's the downside that you probably heard a lot about these no code tools. That they're great to give you a proof of concept. They'll give you the product
Correct.
market fit validation, they'll get you the initial set of users, but they're going to be really difficult to scale beyond a
Correct.
specific point. So you kind of have to, at that point, invest that money you've earned in those early stages in bringing in the talent to actually build that solution the right way, to design these models in the way that will build kind of that long-term competitive moat for your business. So, and it comes in stages. And again, don't over-engineer the initial stages.
Right.
Do that very cheaply, but then do invest into those later stages because the robustness of your business, the scalability of your business is really going to matter over time.
Right. Um, y- that's definitely true. You can build really fast now, and how you market it and how you gain that traction with the customers, like you said, right? Even though there are thousands of them, only few do stand out.
Mm-hmm.
There. So, any specific AI startup product in a healthcare perspective that you saw made a big difference from which is from ROI perspective or from any kind of make a difference in a health system?
I would say the two types of application, I'm not going to give you like maybe the specifics, but that
Mm.
see a huge gain, and maybe I can give you like some business specific functions, but I would say back office operations. So
Okay.
in healthcare, as you know, providing services is one component. So you can develop solutions that help with clinical decision making. So frontline workers do perform their jobs better. So
Mm.
in healthcare, they carry a different, again, risk profile because now you're dealing in this like red zone of, your decisions or the AI decisions could be potentially impacting people's lives. So you kind of have
Correct.
to look at where do you get the biggest bang for your buck. Those types of solutions tend to take more time to mature because you have
Mm.
higher expectations from an accuracy standpoint for what the frontline workers or even your organization will let you put out in the market before you can actually use the
Mm.
tool out in the wild.
Mm.
Easier, I would say, solutions that have shorter span of ROI would be back office operations. Those have
Okay.
lower risk profiles. They're used by knowledge workers who are really excellent at what they do already, but they can
Mm.
delegate certain things and then become certain things to AI and become the QAs. They are ultimately the decision makers behind that system, but they tend to be much shorter tasks. It's summarization, coming out, composing
Correct.
documents, and things like that. Sometimes in the clinical domain, when you're talking about revenue cycle management,
Right.
there's a lot of, I would say, repetitive things that coders, billers do, and you probably
Mm.
even intuitively know that
Mm.
like a visit gets transcribed into codes or into a
Right.
transcription, then it gets summarized into a clinical chart, then it gets converted into clinical codes. That happens
Yeah.
for every single encounter. Every time
Correct.
that a patient visits, like a conversation that a provider had with the patient gets converted into a set of codes.
Mm.
Now, historically, a human was able to kind of do that, but the interpretations of notes to those codes really varied, which led to, or often lead to, denials and other things because
Right.
there's some gray areas. Could you use
Mm.
that to help do that repetitive work to someone else? And then things that are much more complicated, then you
Right.
delegate to kind of folks who can only do that type of craft. But the
Mm.
the your typical, runny nose types of encounters, things that are much
Mm.
more streamlined. I don't know that a worker would be like a knowledge worker would be happy about continuing, like that's all they did all day was to do 100 encounters to go from
Mm.
note to codes and then do that repetitively. I would say
Correct.
it would be probably tiring and not as exciting of a work day. So those are the things that I think you can clearly improve efficiencies, but then you can start to bring in or use the knowledge of your experts in the coding space and the billing space to be able to take on more complex and challenging cases, maybe
Mm.
potentially work on denials and other workflows. What
Mm.
if that they will help you now scale your business? So now I'm working at an organization that is not is working with large kind of hospitals and I'm sorry, physician groups, and by being able to do back office operations for these large hospitals, we'll be able to help them actually bring in more business so that we
Okay.
can actually help them, manage more of their backflow, back office workflow, which, their revenue cycle days continue to pile up and then extend because they're so behind. Can we actually catch them up? And then could that be a source of one of those things? And then can we use the time that we've saved a lot of these workers to like help on the other part of the business to accelerate that? And so we're
Correct.
catching them up. And then also, once they're caught up, can they actually now sustain bringing in more potential, customers through their doors? And this is kind of how you're kind of thinking about it. It's not about letting go of your workforce or layoffs. It's about how you're actually leveraging technology to actually streamline your back office operations, catch your business up, but also scale the business.
Right.
Because one of the reasons for the layoffs, instead of re-engineering workflows, people are saying, well, how can we recoup some of our back office operations, and like how can we do that quickly? Layoffs is like, again, the very easy thing to do.
Wait.
Re-engineering the workflows, and then that takes time, but it's also difficult to do. But there's so much more opportunity if you spend the time of actually seeing, like, I'm sitting on a pot of gold. Like, I've trained a
Right.
thousand or whatever, let's say, experts, or however many experts you have in the back office operations. Why the heck are you going to let them go? Like, why would you? Like, you're sitting on a pot of
Correct.
gold that you can help your business grow in so many different areas. And so if
Right.
you've invested the time in skilling and up training them, it's about having them work on more challenging things in your
Correct.
business, and then helping kind of streamline the back office operations, how having them help you understand how the back office process can be re-engineered better. It's not driven from the top. That's not where re-engineering is the most effective. It's actually the people who have been in the weeds, in the kind of
Right.
these processes, that can inform how to do these things better. So it's listening to them and then seeing
Right.
how they envision that work to be changing, and they will help you get there. So, and they tend to be, again, I would say midterm, from a perspective of how long will it take to actually do, but it does require some hard work of re-engineering workflows, resetting expectations for what people do, but actually building the solutions to accompany those workflows. And then, of course, you also have the last piece, which you probably heard a lot about more recently, is agentic AI and then workflow automations. So
Right.
those are the things that I would say is almost like a gray zone for me, because I need to, it's like a case by case basis. And so depending on the industry, not necessarily healthcare, or maybe if it's deployed in healthcare, I would use it with caution, because I would say in healthcare or in certain industries, that human to human connection is so important that
Yes.
just because you can doesn't mean you should, type of, again, that conversation, because people value trust. And the example that I've kind of used before is, when I call, and I'm guilty of this, like I used it last week. So when I
Mm-hmm.
call, let's say, a 1-800 number, the moment I hear an agent speaking to me, and I'm like, speak to a live agent, speak to a live agent, or I
Oh,
go 0 0 0 0,
I know.
because I'm like, I know that this thing is not going to solve my problem. I'm just going to waste my 5 minutes explaining this, agent what I need to do, and then my problem is not going to be solved. So that's the
Yes.
sentiment. And then instead of actually building efficiencies in your business, which is ultimately why you're doing it, it's leading to frustrated customers who want to do less business with you in the first place. So it could
Right.
actually
Right.
be impacting your business negatively. So depends on what the automation is. Again, if it's invisible and it doesn't touch any of your core processes, it doesn't touch customers, use it with caution. But there are, again, opportunities when maybe you need to capture some immediate confirmation, maybe schedule an appointment, find the time, easy. But when it comes down to customer service, when it comes down to that relationship connecting with hearing, and then empathy building,
Yeah.
I would say be cautious about applying those tools, even though they are possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I totally get it. I too get frustrated with the phone calls and like get me an agent faster, right? But
Right.
then recently I've been calling up these airlines and I can make out the difference. They've got much better. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they can understand different accents. They can understand different languages now. So I think overall they're getting better every year, I guess.
Oh yeah, of
So
course.
yeah, yeah. So it's the back office part is one of the things, major things with healthcare,
Mhm.
especially, right? It's been really manually intensive, and that is where we're seeing a lot more gains also,
Yes, exactly.
right?
And those are, as I mentioned, like easier to deploy, but lower risk to the organization because they're
Right,
kind of behind the scene. There's less brand or reputational risk if something goes south. You can kind of
right.
solve it internally under kind of without public scrutiny and things like that. And then you can
Yes,
resolve those tasks. Anything that's front facing, again, has different repercussions and different risk profile for that reason.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting how healthcare got into AI so much faster. And I guess, like you said, right, the staff was spending a lot of very manually intensive time. And
Hmm.
I think that was a push. So there are a lot of things on startup actually. I still need to get into, but I think we do have less time. Anything you want to talk about your startup and your the way you work with companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And happy to do, if it's of interest to the listeners, if they find it valuable, please let Deepti know, and we'll do maybe a round two and really dive into kind of the startup space. I wouldn't call my company a startup. I would call it more of like an advisory
Right.
consulting agency and more of a training speaking type of agency. So I focus on helping startups get started, go to market, develop solutions, identify opportunities within their business, and just how you kind of hear me talk about it now. Just because you can doesn't always necessarily mean you should. So I am I come to these startups and smaller organization as a realist, and I have to
Okay.
set realistic expectations. But I'm also trained in IP law, so I understand what actually makes you
Mm,
defendable in your business. So I can help advise on the strategy on where AI could really play a significant role in helping you grow. But what would make it hard, how to acquire data, what to do with that data, what kind of teams to stand up. So to develop a solution, what are the timeframes kind of look like. So I don't necessarily stay within the companies to actually implement the systems, but I help advise on the strategy to build, and I do
mm,
advise kind of on an ongoing basis. But I also do trainings. So just like, there are companies who are, a bit lost as to what do we do with this powerful technology? How do we actually make it work in our business? I
mhm.
also, the TEDx topic that I'm speaking about, this kind of caters to the audience on the receiving end. So, well, with
Okay.
AI coming through the doors, and it's clearly there, and we kind of feel it as a force that's coming to us. What, how do we make ourselves irreplaceable? So, what
Mm,
skills will persist beyond AI automation that makes us irreplaceable in the age of AI? So, a lot of my trainings is about building resiliency in the age of AI, understanding how to become fluent in AI, what to build, what type of skills that you kind of have to build that are going to be hard for AI to replace. How do you really kind of stand that time? So my trainings, my talks tend to be more catering to the folks who are fearful about AI replacing everything, and then so how do you build the future with AI? Yeah, and then I speak a lot on the topics with organizations, do keynotes and do public speaking. Podcasts like this are really great to disseminate the knowledge. And I do believe in human first AI, that we have to be mindful to how we're plugging in AI technology and use it inside the businesses while preserving human dignity and humans kind of at the core of the business. Yeah, so I think that that's how I'm found on all of the kind of major social media channels. I've recently standardized all of my handles to Svetlana on AI. So whether you're
okay.
looking for me on Instagram, X, you can find me on LinkedIn by my full name, but all of the other kind of social media, I've tried to standardize to that. So Hope
Okay.
you find me. So if I can be of any help, yeah, I would love
No,
to talk to you.
no, definitely, I would encourage startups, especially AI in healthcare startups, to leverage your services in terms of advisory. Those are really important for a startup to scale, especially. And yeah, and I really look forward for your TEDx talk. That's a very interesting topic, and I would encourage all viewers also to follow that. Um, just before we conclude, anything else you want to, is there some misconception of AI that you want to dispel with the viewers, or any takeaway for the viewers you want to have?
I think that there's a lot of, I would say, controversial topics that kind of float around in the space, but I would say a big misconception, and maybe coming from my perspective and take it with a grain of salt, but that, AI has reached AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, that it has surpassed human
Oh,
kind of capabilities, that it can think better than we can, and that, it depends on how you kind of define it and then what your time horizon is. But I can tell you that it's going to be really difficult for AI given the current,
mm,
let me use a technical term, architectures, to really
right,
surpass everything that we as humans do. And so when people say like, oh, AI is coming for our jobs and taking over, it will take over some jobs because of, as I kind of talked about, there's clear automations, things that are repetitive, that is going to be really hard for a business to like not to justify keeping as like a human effort and not automate. So, but
right,
hopefully they are transitioning their folks to do other work, but they will be new kind of jobs being created that will build those differentiated skills that AI will always have a gap in. AI is
yeah,
never meant to be 100% accurate. We know that. There's always going to be, so who handles that gap? It's
correct.
us, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
someone has to be always in the loop to kind of take care of like these edge cases, the things that AI cannot be trusted with or delegated with. And maybe one example that I was just writing yesterday some of my thoughts, planning to release a newsletter on this. But think
hmm,
about, would you delegate your life? So if you were to come into an office, let's say a healthcare appointment, and the physician said, yeah, I'm not going to perform a surgery on you. Actually, this robot over here is going to actually do end to end surgery on you. Would you feel comfortable actually delegating, putting yourself on that table and putting your whole trust in that robot performing that surgery successfully? Probably not. And
correct.
this is
Yeah,
why we're fearful of those not, and then if the doctor says, but it's 99% accuracy, we've never seen like a single case. It's that
correct.
1% that scares us, right? That's
Yes,
that 1% that's like, but what if I am in that 1% phase? When I lay on that table, something goes wrong and everything like that. It doesn't matter how
right.
accurate the model is. There's always, because it's never 100% accurate in anything that AI does, that there's always a place for a human to intervene, for a human to really
Right.
create that impact. So I want maybe your listeners to take away that,
Mm,
to maybe take the all of the messages about AGI and then them taking over all of the human capabilities and automating everyone's jobs away, that
yeah.
there is a place for
I
all of us, and that's by design.
correct. Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree with this. And last year, I guess there was more fear. This year we are probably getting to know that there is gonna be more work, even with AI, for everyone, right? Yeah. Okay. So thank you, everyone. This is a great start to 2026, and thank you so much for your insights, Svetlana. It was great having you.
Thank you so much for having me. All right.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.